Awesome.
Living the dream.
Awesome.
So pumped.
Amazing. Amazing. We're here today for a fireside chat with Brett Queener. Do you want to wait for a few folks to trickle in some more? Going to start us off with a quick icebreaker. Going along with the theme of Halloween for this week, want to ask you guys, if you guys are dressing up, what are you dressing up as? If you aren't, what's been your favorite costume?
Brett, HB4 Beauty. What are you dressing up as?
Oh, I thought that. I'm dressing up as a.
Oh goodness.
I don't even know the answer to that question. I don't celebrate Halloween anymore. I guess
Oh,
I'm.
but knowing you, you're gonna be the guy on the block who's giving out like king size candy bars to all the trick or treaters. Like the Queener household down there in Santa Barbara. All the kids are like, just like go around the block and come back again, right?
No, I think I'll be up in Sandy and Nez. So I don't know. Maybe I'll. Which is very. It's a weird thing. Like, it's very Trumpy there. Like it's so Trumpy that like you've got that picture, the posters of Trump as Rambo, which I never really understood who created that
Well,
meme.
then you should dress up as Rambo. I think that would be fantastic.
Maybe you know what I'll do? I'll dress up as a Reagan Republican. I'll be the only one. That's what I'll dress up.
That'll be amazing. Well, my 5-year-old is gonna be a my 5-year-old's gonna be a ninja. So I think I'm either gonna be his like victim, or maybe I'll be like Splinter the Rat from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. What do you think, Elliot? What are you gonna be?
Oh, me, doing a couple's costume alongside with my girlfriend, and this is purely based off the fact that I have a mustache. Bob Belcher from Bob's Burgers.
Wow.
Yeah. I don't know if you guys have seen the show. Pretty simple costume. I'm excited for it. Will be very comfortable this Halloween.
I love it.
For sure.
I love it. All right. Well, let's get jamming here.
Totally. All right, everyone. We're here today for a fireside chat with Brett Queener. Super excited about the content and takeaways everyone's going to be getting out of this event. Today's event is brought to you by the team here at Modern Sales Pros. For those of you who are not familiar, Modern Sales Pros is the world's largest and highest quality community for those in sales management, sales leadership, sales and revenue operations, and sales enablement, aka our Modern Sales Pros. Our mission is to create an environment for our members to answer questions they struggle to solve on their own and help them see around corners that they may not know about. We do that through live sessions like this, an online forum, and our quarterly summits. If you're not already a part of MSP, you're going to be invited to join after this event. If you do like this event, you like our content, you're definitely going to love our 3-day RevX Fest that we just hosted. We pulled together about 24 events. It was
awesome.
Yes, bananas, as Pete would say.
Bananas.
Yeah, bananas. We learned from the CEO of Gainsight, Outreach, HighSpot, dozens of other speakers like them. Going to be dropping the link to those recordings in the chat. Give me 1 second, guys. Yes, link to those recordings is now in the chat. Definitely check it out. You don't want to miss out. So before we dive in, do you want to go over some housekeeping notes? First of all, this event is being recorded. You'll be able to access this recording and key takeaways on the previous events page of the MSP website. Second, if there's any questions for our panelists, please do use the Q&A function, and we'll be sure to get to them during the event, or you can reach out to them on LinkedIn afterwards. Okay. Let's get into the meat of things. Going to be handing things off to you, Pete. Talk a little bit about Atrium, introduce yourself, and Brett.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Elliot. Appreciate it. Hey, folks. For folks that don't know, Atrium's the sponsor of today's Modern Sales Fireside Chat. Atrium makes data-driven sales management software. It's software that helps sales managers, leaders, and reps use metrics and data to improve the performance of their teams. And the way that the way that the software does that is by setting up a read-only connection to your CRM. It takes about 5 minutes to set up. It's pretty cool. And has 100+ metrics out of the box deployed, and more importantly, will continuously monitor all those KPIs in order to tell you what's going good, what's going not so good in your sales organization, so you can change rep behavior to make things better. We work with hundreds of modern sales organizations to help them do just that, and we're really pumped to have Brett here today. We're sales management and sales operations best friend, and so like this is I'm particularly excited about us talking with Brett today because he's been doing sales operations. Now he's an august, a venture investor and what have you. We'll talk about that a little bit more here in a second. But way back in the day, he was the first sales operations OG at Salesforce. So Brett, why don't you introduce yourself and let people know kind of like what you spend your time on here at Bonfire, and then maybe give them a little bit of a preview of like the last 3 roles before that. Okay.
Sure. I was just looking up August. So respected and impressive. Wow. Thank you, Pete.
Sorry.
Yeah, there you go. So I'm Brett, partner at Bonfire Ventures. We'll get to it later. Bonfire is a seed stage software company seed stage investment firm that we only invest in software companies at the seed stage. We tend to be the lead investor. We try to do things a little different. We sort of lean in with our firms. We have about $1 billion under management, and we're investing out of a roughly $180 million fund, which we raised and closed before the recent SaaS downturn. So timing turns out to work well. So we have lots of dry powder to invest in amazing founders.
Do you hear that, everyone? Lots of dry powder. Hear that? Hit Brett up.
But we're going to take a longer amount of time to due diligence and get to know each other, etc.
No shotgun weddings.
Really, this is sort of my second career. Prior to Bonfire, I spent about 20 plus years working at software companies. So early executive of a company called Siebel Systems, which was the fastest growing software company of the 90s. Early executive at Salesforce.com, which was the fastest growing company of the OOs, I think is what the kids call it.
Salesforce. Never heard of that. Yeah,
never
heard of that one. Yeah, weird.
And then after Salesforce, I felt like I had been a fraud working at 2 companies run by billionaires, which I'm sure I was helpful at, but I was like, wait a minute, they probably would have been just fine without me. Went and partnered with a founder at a pre-revenue company selling into recruiting.
Oof.
Yes, tough space, as you know, Pete, but learn the hard things about hard things. Ran an innovator's dilemma playbook at a buyer that didn't respond to that, so that was a lot of fun. But the company subsequently is valued, raised a bunch of money, north of 70 million recurring revenue. It's a unicorn,
all that good stuff.
All that good stuff. And so that's my background.
I love it. Yeah. So as everyone can kind of see, quite the arc. I'm pumped to get into some of these kind of questions here because Brett's like uniquely positioned to speak things. For folks who don't know me, I'm Pete Kazanji. I'm one of the founders of Atrium. I was noting earlier. I also am responsible for our go-to-market function. Like the fancy pants term for that is our CRO. Prior to Atrium, I started a recruiting software company called TalentBin. I was acquired by Monster Worldwide in 2014. And that's like really where I kind of got intimate with modern sales. I went from being a business generalist founder to our first seller, to our first sales manager, sales leader at TalentBin. And then after we were acquired by Monster, I went from running a 20-person sales organization to being responsible for new product sales at a 1,000-person sales organization. So like just a little bit different. And then subsequent to that, wrote a book on startup sales called Founding Sales, and then started Modern Sales Pro. So that's a little bit on me. For folks who are interested, we are giving away a copy of Behind the Cloud. So for folks who are here, if you'd like to get a copy of Behind the Cloud, this essentially is the the corporate biography of like early Salesforce. I've read it. I like it a lot. It's like written in vignettes. So it's not exactly like a narrative or whatever. It's like a bunch of little vignettes, which is like really kind of nice for kind of consuming things piecemeal. And I've really enjoyed it. I'm sure that I'm sure Brett could tell us like all the things that are like BS in it, but I've really enjoyed it. We're gonna go ahead and drop a link to that here in the chat there. But otherwise, we'll get into some of these questions here for you, Brett. So, you worked in, I guess it was called field operations at Siebel.
I think I made up that title.
Really?
Yeah.
You just needed me. It's like needed to make it sound like fancy pants. So you worked at that at Siebel, and then also at Salesforce. And like before like Salesforce enabled the modern sales tech stack, which we're going to talk about a little bit more here in a second, like sales operations looked a lot different, right? Or the sales prevention department. So like maybe what you could talk about is like what that looked like in early Salesforce, and then like how that changed in Salesforce, like as you guys were like changing how the sales world worked with the software that you guys were selling. It's like very inception-y. Maybe you can kind of give us a little bit of a run through there.
All right. This may sound like back in my day, or
It's
Zoomer.
exactly what it is.
Or Zoomer, get off my porch. But I think it's important to understand if we were going to run a sales ops, it wasn't even friggin' webinars, but let's just say a webinar was a thing, and we're going to invite all the sales ops people in 2003 to join. There'd be like one person who was super sad.
10
and
people in the room.
And they worked probably in the MIS or ID department, and they were just miserable. Sales ops wasn't really a formal job as we know it today, right? Back then in the on-premise world, sales ops meant being stuck somewhere between IT and the business.
Right.
And it was kind of interesting, like after Siebel, people understand back then you would sell enterprise software getting on jets with expensive reps, or down market, it was kind of through a channel or a prize. This idea of like selling software over the phone and building relationships didn't exist. And so I actually was going to get out of software. Prior to business school, I was running a factory. I'm an operator, right? And I remember I went to go see an alum from Dartmouth, TJ Rogers at Cypress Semiconductor, this sort of irascible old guy. And he was giving a career advice speech. And he said, people, in your jobs, if you're not in the job of making shit or selling shit, you're bullshit. And I was like, oh my God, I am bullshit. I need to go do something else. But then I met Mark. You got to remember, like Salesforce back then was like, we had a
Mark Benioff, just for everyone, Mark Benioff.
Mark Benioff. You got to remember, like at the time, Salesforce had like a product with like 4 tabs, a free trial.
I remember, man.
It was month to month. There's no analytics. There's no dashboards. There's no API. There's no customization.
It's reskinned Oracle database in the cloud.
But I had this crazy thought, which was I was like, if he's right, if you tailor the product, the packaging, the demand model, the sales process, and the skill set of your people involved to each segment of the market, you could actually, over time, sell and serve every segment of the market. And if you got it right from a recurring revenue perspective, because the problem in on-premise was like, especially if you're public, if you made your quarter, great. If you didn't, you had a 20% layoff and you were sad. And I was like, oh, and as long as you didn't actually have to pay salespeople for the renewals, you could actually build a cash machine. And that was like, okay, let's go do it. That was the thesis of the job. At Salesforce. Getting back in time, this is time Salesforce had probably, 20 salespeople. Even at that time, we'll get to it later if we have time, some hunter-farmer model. They had copied an Oracle teleassist model where there were like 8 to 9 reps and like 6 assist reps. And we had just started investing in what we called the enterprise experiment, which was starting to hire some field reps that had sold Oracle's, Siebel, SAP in the field. But 95% of Salesforce's business at the time was to the SMB market, where basically Siebel was irrelevant. All of it was primarily inbound, and the product was very nascent. And that's kind of where we were. And then the question is, what was sales ops then? Right.
Well, I think one of the things that's really interesting, one of the things that I've always loved about Salesforce is like, don't plug your ears, Brett. Like more the business model than the actual like software itself, largely because like it's one of the first places that like proved that you could sell direct SaaS via direct sales model. Using new technology, which was inside sales reps selling over the phone. We didn't have Zoom back then.
I'm trying to remember what we did.
And that's like really cool. But then of course, what that really means is like you're running a revenue factory, right? because it's not a bunch of like, enterprise reps out in the field having like 3 meetings a week or what have you. So sales ops would be like extremely important in that regard, right?
Yeah, well, the other thesis was we could build our own. If you look at the people, great executives like Warren Wick and the rest of them, I remember I was doing a training. He was an SDR. His cert was so good. I called up the head of the, David Rudnitsky was running the East Field, and I said, I've hired your new rep. What's his name? His name is Warren Wick. He's like, he's an SDR. I'm like, he runs circles around any of your reps. I'm like, Warren, tell your girlfriend you're moving to the East Coast, but you could build your own. That was the thesis.
Mm-hmm.
At the time we had a team of me, and I think there was like 2 people, right? Now, to be clear, we hired great people. Like at some point, Kendall Collins, who was the CMO of Okta and App Dynamics and other companies, I think he was one of my ops people. Mike Rosenbaum, who, ended up running the platform and a lot of Salesforce product, and then now is CEO of Guidewire, was like my internal tooling guy. But look, at the time, the focus was, can we get the tooling right? And there was no tooling. All we had was Salesforce.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? How do we understand and manage our performance today? Second, get the data right. You think this will laugh, but I remember I had to fight 6 months to upload the D&B account hierarchy, external data into our own data model, because I wanted to basically say, if we're going to go hire people,
to make sure they have things to shoot at.
How do I have a concept of a territory, and I'm making sure that each territory I'm giving people an optimal chance to succeed? Get the training right. When I joined, we hadn't trained any salespeople in about 9 months to a year. So I had 4 weeks. Mark said, can you run a week-long boot camp for all the employees in 4 weeks, and at the end do a certification? And if people don't pass twice, they no longer are employed.
So.
And then get the org and hiring right, which is, okay, we're primarily SMB. If we're going to go up market, what are the ratios? AE to SDR to SE management, and where to hire. Because the most important question there was, where do we hire the next 10 reps to, and we didn't raise a lot of venture, right? So we couldn't actually like burn a lot of cash. So it was very much focused on, based on the cash that we had and the rest of it, how do we make sure each incremental we hire would yield fruit?
Those seem like pretty important, like evergreen sales operations topics right there, right? Like full database strategy, territory modeling, right? Like ramp modeling, forecasting, et cetera, et cetera. Let's talk a little bit about, I think I was having like these like flashbacks as you were talking about sales ops sitting between like IT and the business, because at Monster, after Talentbin was acquired, they were actually running on a Siebel the Siebel CRM instance. It was miserable. So we actually kept running our Salesforce instance, like the Talentbin Salesforce instance. We used it as a shadow CRM, which actually was one of the ways that I found out like a bunch of problems that were in the Monster sales organization, which then subsequently inspired Atrium. Story for another time. But Siebel was like, it was oh boy, it was very different than Salesforce. And even though Salesforce, like when it started out, was like not very full featured and so on and so forth, but at least it could be like administered by like a non-IT person and what have you. And I think there's like some good lessons there as it relates to startups that are taking on an incumbent. So like Salesforce was not a new category of software. Like CRM software exists, right? It just happened to be like a replatforming going from on-prem to the cloud. And so, so there was definitely a platform shift that was going on, but it's still like obviously a fight. And I think you talk a lot about like how cultural differences were pretty key between Siebel and Salesforce, and like other things as well. So like for people who are in our audience right now who are going after an existing like incumbency, like for a known category, maybe you'd have some kind of recommendations there on how to go about that.
Yeah, I won't go too much into the culture of Siebel other than to say there was a dress code that was enforced. Men had to wear suits and women had to wear hose, and you could have one plant in the office because we conducted our business with the utmost professionalism. So there are many stories.
Two plants, you're not a professional anymore.
No. Look, in the end, the Siebel product didn't work. It didn't actually deliver the promise to making reps more effective, et cetera. And if you were responsible for making that product successful in your org, sales ops, sales admin, you were miserable.
You're grumpy.
So, if you're going to take on incumbents, what I would say is you must focus on the end user of that product and the person who's responsible for that product's success. Like, people would think at Salesforce that person is the head of sales or the rep. It was not, right? It was the sales ops director admin. I don't even know if you could have a director title or director of sales systems.
Yeah.
So we focused so much of our energy about making them successful and powerful. Let me give you a crazy story. We go to try to sell to Dell, and I'm brought to an executive dinner table, and there's the IT team on the right, and there's this business team on the left, and I'm in the middle, because the business and IT team were at war, because the IT team was like, wait, the business is going to do their own dashboards? We're going to let the business configure their own business processes?
What?
And I was, yes, this was like sitting at a dinner table between Jesus Christ and Charles Darwin. You're not really going to go very far. And this sales ops person was stuck in the middle. So
you became homies with the sales ops person.
Well, you became homies with the sales ops person, and you found a way to the other people go, like, I don't understand what the core issue here. Like, wouldn't it be better if you focused on like core architecture, IT, and integration systems, et cetera? But we spent so much energy on making those people successful. We thought about our product and what we did to make them successful.
Just hug the hell out of them.
And then we promoted the hell out of them. Because like, if you go to Dreamforce, and if you're in sales ops, I assume you've been there, it is a completely irrational event. If you've been there for the first time, you're like, wait a second, this is a company that produces a product that has a graphical view of tables that are stored in an underlying Oracle database. And now it's a custom platform with a lot of integrations, and its apps are moderately used.
It's a way of life. It's a vibe.
And what that is thousands of people associated their success and their personal success and their career success with Salesforce. That, and so that's, if you're taking an incumbent, what I say is, can you create strong emotional resonance on the core persona you're going after? If not, go back to the drawing board. But just go back to the drawing board. Like, you're not, et cetera. The other thing I would say in a less and warm and friendly approach, the flip side is, if you're taking on an incumbent, you have to have a stance. You can't be like, my product is easier to use, it's freemium. Take a stance, a public stance. What are you for and what are you against? People forget at Salesforce, we used to show up at Siebel user conferences with fake protests, with no software, right? We would protest software. And of course, Siebel associated with it. We were for a new movement, and you have to take a stance, and you need to be public about it. It also probably didn't hurt that for those that have worked with me, I can be intense. I'm less intense than I was, but I was the only executive that Siebel chose to sue that went to Salesforce. So I spent 18 hours a day for 4 years trying to destroy Siebel at every turn. And when I left, they had $25 billion in market cap. And when they sold to Oracle for $5.6 billion, that's a pretty good drop. And, they faded off into irrelevance. So I think I did okay there.
It turned out. So as somebody who was in sales ops, you actually then eventually transitioned into working on different parts of the product at Salesforce. What kind of, what drove that? And like, are there any kind of like particular lessons for sales operations professionals kind of like bound up in that story?
Always be careful about telling the CEO everything that you think. So I think there was a time where I was giving Mark Benioff very strong opinions about our product and product strategy. Remember, this is 2018, the last economic crash that we had in the United States.
2008, not 18, right?
Or 2008. Yes, I date myself. 2008. It's been a long time. 2008. And at that time, we were kind of a mid-market SFA product. We were not sophisticated enough for the price and already getting a little too hard to use for SMB. And he said, fine, why don't you run product? So after getting over the obvious internal protest by the people that were in the R&D org about having the inmate run the asylum, my focus in running product was that of an ops person. Now, I was a dork back in high school. Like I went to Atari camp. I used to code in BASIC, et cetera. But in the end, and maybe Salesforce had 50, 60 developers at the time. The whole product was bit and peel SQL. Maybe we had 5 front-end developers. And so my product strategy was very focused around what would allow Salesforce to best serve the existing customers today, minimize churn rate, and make hard calls. 2, what would allow the reps we have today to increase their competitive win rates?
Yep.
Okay. 3, what strategy would allow us to add 30 to 50% more reps every year for at least a decade without dropping quota and with 60 to 80% of our reps making number? So I really sort of took a product strategy approach of looking from an ops perspective, like, hey, from an ops perspective, how many people, what can they drive? How do I drive win rate? How do I drive TAM? And then a part of that was, what was the right platform strategy to drive? At the time this was when Obama was getting elected. And it was very a red state versus blue states. I'm not going to get into the politics of today, but we had a platform team that thought we could be AWS or Google Cloud. And what was driving the right platform strategy to enable those, which was pretty much the app form. And so just quickly, look, I hired amazing general managers who thought about the business. We made hard trade-offs, so we didn't have 30 teams of 3. I had product executives spend at least a third of their time in deals or with customers. Next 4 years, we launched Service Cloud, Marketing Cloud, Platform Cloud, the App Exchange, and even Chatter, but that's a conversation for another day. But the lesson really is, what is the approach I took from a product perspective, and what's the approach from a sales ops perspective, and why sales ops should partner really closely with product, is I drove a product strategy around who are we building for, the ICP. What is their core pain? Like if we were going to do discovery, do we believe there's thesis around there's core pain around a job to be done? How do we solve it better than somebody else? That's clear, the differentiation. And why do they care? Like, why would they need to do this now? Urgency. So, the interesting thing is how I thought about product strategy is how sales ops leaders should be thinking about their entire job. Pete always chuckles when Pete didn't mention I'm on their, poor Pete and Jason, I'm on their board, and he'll pull up the interest. And I'll be like, hey, Pete, do you have enough pipeline? Or are the close rates? Where's your close rate for? Right. But at the end of the day, if you're in sales ops, those 4 things you have to drive mastery at an org, not someone else. And then align and partner with product and marketing, the rest of it, to go drive that.
Yeah, I think there's definitely that. I think the other thing that I always kind of laugh about is that sales operations is somewhat like the product manager of the sales organization as well, because there's an infinite number of, especially in early stage companies, there's an infinite number of things you could potentially do to enhance your sales organization in motion, and there's an infinite number of things that are broken, right? So like bugs. Problem is you can't do them all, right? And so you have to prioritize.
It's a great analogy, because there are great product managers and there are shitty product managers. Shitty product managers are an internal product manager. Oh, I make sure the trains are running on station and our delivery, and we all know what we're delivering. An external product manager understands, well, what is the market opportunity? Yep. Why is what we build? Are we building the
right thing?
And it's very close to a really good sales ops person and a poor one. A poor one's like, I got my tools, I got my prospects, I got my dashboard, and a good sales ops person's like, what the hell are we doing here? Like, what market?
How do I make the AEs more successful?
Correct.
Example.
Yes.
Yeah. User centricity, right? User centricity. The user happens to be or in the case, like, how do I make the AEs more successful? Or what we espouse in Atrium land is like, how do I make the managers more successful? Because the managers are the people who have leverage on the various teams. Of course, the way to do that is you just buy Atrium for the managers, and like poof, everything, all problems are solved.
Turns out good sales management actually matters.
Weird, shocker. Who would have ever thought? Well. So one of the things that's like, yeah, like I get super geeked out on this at Atrium all the time because like being in an organization gets to like use your own product to like is a total superpower, right? And we're at the point where like we have 10 sellers and six SDRs. Like we're great. Like we are like right like mid bottom like ICP for us. Like organizations that use Atrium are like anywhere between like 10 sellers to like 300 sellers, and so like it really hums. And because like you have your own pains, you get to eat your own dog food, like you're going over to product and like choking them and being like, this is broken, and like you just have like really good empathy because it's like sitting right in your room. You guys had the same thing going on at Salesforce where you were using your own product, but the other thing that was kind of even crazier is that because of the platformization of of Salesforce, it also was enabling the creation of like the modern sales stack, right? Like that didn't really exist if you think about it, and prior. And then because now all of a sudden you had this shared database that had like APIs, you could read off of it, you could write into it, et cetera, like 1,000 flowers bloom. And I think you've like invested quite a bit in the sales tech stack. Like I think you're an investor in Outreach, you're certainly an investor in Atrium, you're an investor in Speckit, right? An enablement tool. And yeah, I just wonder like what was that like working at enabling that whole new new market, if you will, and how is the stack changed? Will it continue to do so? Like kind of what's your point of view on those sort of things?
Funny little story. Look, at the end of the day, we had only so many resources at Salesforce, so we could only build so much. So in the early days, it was like, let's partner. The reality is we're never going to build something meaningful enough here. We did an analysis on the App Exchange. It was originally called the App Store. I don't know if you know, but Mark was really close friends with Steve Jobs, and he gave App Store Steve when Steve launched the App Store.
Didn't he own like didn't he own like a domain or something? Was it appstore.com?
Yeah, we have the name.
Yeah, it was like the domain. Yeah.
We did math and we said, what is the most that somebody would spend for SaaS tooling on top of Salesforce that we didn't sell them? And we were like, man, an aggressive forecast, the most they would spend, because remember, Enterprise Edition was like $100. They'll spend another $100 in total.
Yeah.
How, when if you're at a company and investors like, I don't understand your TAM, you're like, well, not many people do. So look, it also helps with, another big thing that happened with Salesforce and growing was the concept of like modern APIs and endpoints and REST and actually making things easy to integrate. There used to be one sales stack, Salesforce.
Yeah,
and then it evolved to like, oh, you needed a marketing solution because Salesforce's marketing solution was nascent. All right, so there's marketing solution.
Marketo, Pardot.
Then we had the concept of an app exchange and the API integration, which was key. So then what did the stack evolve to? Right? The evolved to what I'll call the subsection of the GTM processes for best of breed that Salesforce didn't do well enough in. Demand gen, pick one of your 5. Conversational engagement, Drift, qualified. SDR prospecting, outreach, sales launch, sales enablement, high spot, whatever these CMS
Seismic.
Mm-hmm. New libraries, sales coaching, Gong, blah, blah, blah. Sales forecasting, because you need more forecasting tools, Clary, CPQs, Steelbreak, blah, 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 blah.
Data-driven sales management.
That's the future. I'm not there yet. That's where.
My bad.
That's the evolution. And look, from an intellectual perspective, most of that stack is boring. It's kind of all the same.
Important. Yeah.
No, I'm not saying it's not. They're great companies. You work in that place. Your company's amazing.
You're talking about we got some customers in there. Chill out.
Oh, no. Like from an intellectual, like dork geek looking at a problem and solving. Like if we're intellectually honest with ourselves, most of them they have a database table. Okay, it's not their own now. It's in AWS or GCP or Azure. Right. We have objects, and we have a visual interface for the data that's in those graphical tables. We have humans hopefully enter data in there. So then we can look at dashboards and analytics to go, hey, something's going on wrong here. I mean, it was so funny. Like I would go out and look at a messed up deployment of Salesforce because, at Salesforce, it was like how Salesforce does sales ops at Salesforce. So Brett, go talk to this person. They're like, we're having adoption issues. And I pull up your screen. Like you have 100 required fields for your rep. Why?
Weird.
And I was like, well, we need the I said, I'm sorry. What business problem were you trying to solve in deploying Salesforce? Did you have a pipeline problem? Did you have a top of funnel problem? Did you have a differentiation problem? And what was the metric you're centering on? Because maybe we should start with that. And they were like, wow, you're a genius. So, and so the challenge now with these sets of tools, and then we have this weird thing where Salesforce was a really easy to use tool on top of an Oracle database, but then Salesforce became a really powerful metadata platform. We have apps on top of it, and now everybody wants to be the new engagement layer. It's like I'm an engagement layer on top of an engagement layer on top of stuff with 15 different things. And a lot of that was because we had a 0% interest rate environment the last 7 years. And here's a new thing to buy. It's a little bit of a mess, and that we got like 5 to 15 tools across the stack, which real complexity for sales ops and the rest of it and managing it. And then the other real thing, it creates what I'll call information overload for the people in theory this stack is for. You said it was the sales tech stack for salespeople. So, where does it go? Short term, I think there's a consolidation of the stack. I think people are spending way too much on this.
I see that happening already. Like SalesLoft has like their own conversation intelligence solution. I think like forecasting is showing up, like Gong's doing forecasting, SalesLoft's doing forecasting, Outreach is doing forecasting. Most organizations, just because they do forecasting out of like Google Sheets, like do some sort of like lightweight opinionated like SaaS workflow like in the sales engagement tool probably makes a lot of sense. I mean, there already was forecasting functionality in Salesforce. It's just like I don't know, hard to use, so people don't use it. Yeah, I think the categories that have emerged over the last like decade or so that are like long in the tooth are definitely prime for consolidation there.
So look, I think the vendors that are what I'll call FNACs, features, not a company, are going to die, be acquired. The rest, like I was on a call yesterday, some YC company, and they were like, okay, so how with lead forms, if you ask too many questions, they won't fill it out. So what we do is we get their email, and then we get them to schedule a meeting and book it. And now that they've booked it, they'll answer more questions. I'm like, that's clever, but that feels like a sales ops hack. I'm not sure that's a company. It's an amazing company, amazing opportunity. But like, unless that company is like really cheap and freemium, and they're just going for like, ubiquity, good luck on that being a meaningful company in 5 years. So there's going to be some collapse, but that's fine. We'll get some of the noise and get rid of the madness. Long term, and this is where I'm starting to get excitement, where I spend a lot of my time on, is I think the next generation of the stack is the products that emerge that move from what I'll call track and show. Track some stuff, show what's going on, to actually help and guide or help improve sellers or managers in the movement. I'm going to help you be more effective at your craft. Because how few applications do you go? I mean, the whole concept that like there's a tab called dashboards in most of these applications. I'm like, I don't understand. I'm going to a record at a company. Why can't you take all the data and tell me what's going on here, what I should be doing, or what, like this interface where like analytics and AI and where you enter the data and where you view it are three separate things. Like that's not how humans think. And so I think we may be on to the next generation, and it's not the first 10 years of bullshit AI that were like, let me tell you next best action. Oh, thank you very much. I've sold to these accounts with this SIC code. I should sell to this next one. Oh my God, I needed to spend $1 million. Okay, come on. And then the challenge is if your data is garbage, those companies primarily become data cleanup companies. So I think it's about helping improve actual performance. And then it's intersected with a world in which, I don't care if you want to call it product-led or prospect-led, but the idea being is that the customer that you're trying to sell to is going to form their own opinions about you before you're able to inject humans. So that's what I'm looking at. And so if you think about some of the investments I made, Atrium, right? We're trying to create a new category, which is like, What if managers actually knew what the core behaviors for each of their segments drives outcomes, close rates, win rates? What if they knew that and it could track what was going on and let you know where your people were deviating, that if you actually met with them, you could coach them to be effective, as opposed to be like, let's go through your deals. Because
that'll never work. It didn't do anything for baseball, hasn't done anything in basketball.
Because
You're changing performance through analysis? That doesn't work.
It also doesn't work because companies invest so much in training managers. Hey, Mr. Rep, you've made your number for 4 years. You've made a lot of money. Now you get to be a rep. Don't be super rep and go manage 8 reps. Go. But don't worry. You can go on to HighSpot and it will tell you that job sucks. So anyways, Spec It, which was, look, in a world where we used to all work in one office and we could get together and we would train people in person, we've now moved to thousands of office using thousands of application information overload. There is a world of moving to contextual learning, which is people don't go to a class, learn. You learn when you do stuff. That's how we do stuff. Demo League one, Pete, you and I are with, which is, so much of our sales process is great. We're going to do discovery. We're going to do qualification. Then the rep talks. And then maybe we bring an SDR, an SE involved, et cetera. Right. In a world that's gone product led, like, why can't, and then the concept of where a demo is like demo happened, as opposed to a demo is a process. Because what is a demo? Right. You're trying to map up how your product meets their needs. So how do you make all of your sellers more effective at showing and explaining the product? And so that's where I'm going to be spending my time sort of going forward in terms of a sales geek area in this space.
Yeah. I mean, my point of view on that is like, there's always like more juice to be squeezed out. And I think there was another fireside chat I was conducting for the last summit, which is like organizations have every incentive to make their sellers more effective. And so when there's a new thing that can, like, if you can take a rep's quota from 500K to like 600K to 700K to 800K, you can't just do that by like waving a magic wand. Obviously you have to like make it such that their ASPs go up or their win rates go up, or they can manage more opportunities concurrently, right? It's like the inputs. And so there's going to be new capabilities that allow you to do that, whether it's like lightweight marketing automation in the form of like Outreach and Sales Loft, or in the case of like Atrium, it's like automate, it's like defect like identification, like, hey, this rep has a hitch in his giddy up like this, his win rate is light because his conversion rate out of proposal is not good as compared to the other 10 reps. Go jump on that because that's his critical path right there. There's going to be emerging things there. There'll probably be a point at which it like hits the top of the S curve. Like you kind of see that in marketing technology, where like the Lumascape is like, oh my God, it's like, looks like a constellation of stars in the sky. But I think there's a lot more kind of like juice there in sales tech land. One thing that happens a lot, and I'd love your kind of take on this, because I think you've been close to Outreach and you've been close to Pendo as well. What we were just describing, this notion of like new categories of software emerge, like conversation intelligence didn't exist before Chorus and Gong. I mean, it did a little bit. There's Exec Vision, there's some other folks here, but like not really focused in on that. Data-driven sales management didn't really exist before Atrium. So you get these like new categories that are being created. What are your kind of recommendations and kind of insights into how you've seen, like, building a movement, how you've seen organizations do category creation well, and the recommendations for people who might be working on that in our audience right now?
I would say first and foremost, building a movement is easier when you're taking out shitty incumbents.
Yeah, like this TPL Salesforce thing.
Because the comparison,
you just like
the
point
pain
at
is
them.
real. Yeah. Now the only key issue is that when you replace the incumbents, don't let your customers be product managers, because in the end they'll have you add all the features that they never use you for and made them hate the product that you replaced. So be very careful with that. A new category creation, it's hard, right? Look, I think there are a couple components of a recipe. One is when you ultimately get your first 10, 25, 50 early adopters, You have got to surround them with love. You must promote them externally and internally all the time. They are your Pied Pipers. Because when you're building a movement, you don't have any credibility that people are going to listen to you in the first
Mm-hmm.
early years. And what you have to do is your movement makers are these early adopters that you're putting out there.
Yeah.
And it used to be in the world of content marketing, you would promote them, da 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 da, and now you get them to write. You help them write, and you promote their knowledge. Because basically, what you're trying to do is create, for those that remember the Gatorade commercials, be like Mike.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Oh God.
right? This is Mike.
That's a deep cut right there, Brett.
Be like Mike. Look at Mike or look at Millie. Mike and Millie are early adopters. They are vanguards of how things should be done in this given role. They're becoming famous as well. Wouldn't you like to be like Mike? Well, work with us. We will make you like Mike.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing is if you're creating a category, and this is often a hard thing when I meet with very sort of tech product oriented founders,
Mhm.
a lot of time, you must find your external voice. I don't care if you're I don't care if you're an introvert or an omnivert. You must find the appropriate extrovert
Yeah.
part, and you must be the Pied Piper. You must go out there. You must explain what you stand for, where the world is going, right? Because
Internally and externally, but like it's the same behavior, right? Essentially, it's just like Nick Meta was talking about this in a Fireside
yeah,
chat the other day. It's just like repetition, 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 and like you're doing it outside, and you got to market internally as well to like get everybody
well,
like lined up.
Mark was talking about the end of software. We were like, dude, our forecasting doesn't work. He's like, stop it. And I remember there was a famous statement that
This,
he would say, don't overestimate what you can get done in a year. You can't create movement in a year, but never underestimate what you can do in a decade. And I guess he was right there. So, like good examples, HubSpot on marketing, Claire
inbound.
around insight and success, Figma and design. And I would even say like Clary and sales management, because you know what I think, which is like Salesforce forecasting is perfectly fine if you use forecast categories and actually have good hygiene and good sales process. And the second you go to a third-party forecasting tool, you know what happens? Your hygiene and your data is crap, and then you're relying on some AI and something else. But they've done a good job. Like if I'm in RevOps or I'm the VP of sales, like, oh, this is my
CRO.
tool. Yes,
Mhm.
the CRO.
Yep. Yep. Exactly. Yeah, I think that I think there definitely is the like I hear what you're saying about the like it's better to like point at the boogeyman and be like booga 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 Siebel, like they're stinky, or like Taleo yuck, right? Or fill in the blank. Or like I guess Workday is probably a great example of this. Going up against again Oracle. But I think what you can also do, but I think there's a key insight that you mentioned about like loving this, like loving up the sales operations person with what you guys were doing. And I think it's like finding the person who has like really unmet pain. Like we do that with like sales managers, SDR managers, et cetera, who are kind of like thrown in the deep end and not supported. And I think that like that's a great way of like that can be a very effective way of helping to build that category, because like you're essentially manifesting their abstract unmet pain into like a concept that like that can then be the boogeyman, right? Rather than being
Yeah.
like Siebel's the boogeyman, it's like your unsupportedness. You're like a sales manager adrift in an ocean with no oar, or like a tennis racket instead of an oar. That's the boogeyman there. Let's love you up. I love the like celebration. Like one of the phrases that we use here at Atrium is we call it lifetime value of the human, right? So there's lifetime value of the account, the customer, or what have you. But early on, and like this is another kind of key insight, the people who are sellers in the audience will see that, like we'll get this. People buy software, like people buy, they justify like the business is buying it, but like people make a decision because like they want to get promoted, or they want to like be able to see their kids more, or like whatever the thing is. And so when you find somebody who's a true believer, and like we have this with Atrium, like we have nearly 300 customers at this point, like we get the folks who are like, oh yeah, this is the future, I've been wanting this for so long. You want to like grab a hold of them, and a quote Brett Queener, put them like take them around in the Pope Mobile for sure, but also just like hang on to them, right? Like hang on to them tight, keep track of where they're going, like love them up, send them, sales nerd water bottles and like, fun things and what have you, because, and actually we use software that kind of tracks where our champions go. Actually a customer of ours, User Gems, does exactly this. Because like those people, like you don't want to lose them, because like they're the ones who like get it. And so just because those are the ones that are going to help you, keep that snowball rolling downhill as much as possible. So LTVH, lifetime value of the human. Other kind of recommendations on category creation, Brett?
Nah, I mean,
Nah. Well, let's change gear a little bit, because like you work with a lot of organizations that have early and mid stage sales teams, like say in the kind of 5 to 50 reps like category. What are the main things that they get wrong, would you say?
sure. All right. So get ready.
Oh God, you have
One,
opinions?
yes. Very poor segment ICP focus. When you're 5 to 50 people, you cannot sell to SMB, mid-market, and enterprise all at the same time. Stop it.
Focus.
Pick one segment, pick one ICP.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Otherwise, you're asking people to like do 50 things at one time, and it doesn't work. I have 2 segments. My mid-market segment is 200 to 2,000 employees. I'm like, what the hell is that sales manager conversation? Because at 200 employees, that's a transactional discussion. And 2,000, are we doing white space analysis? I don't even know how you would forecast. 2, lack of really figuring out like how they're going to create pipeline. Don't go hire 10 reps unless you have some confidence that you're going to go create pipeline for them. Otherwise, you just hire a bunch of reps and everybody gets sad and no one makes their number. Like, don't do that. Ironically, too little actual selling. Okay?
Yeah.
Selling is not taking somebody through a qualification checklist. Selling is not demoing the product. Selling is not like, what do you think? Will you get back to me? 80% of selling is done in the first 2 conversations. Like if you cannot match a real customer pain that matters for the prospect to something you solve really well and they don't confirm it, that's not a deal.
What are we even doing here? Like, what is it? Let's get real or let's not play, right? And you can very quickly understand early on. Do you either believe that you have a pain that I solve, or can I reveal to you an unrecognized pain that I can solve? But either of those things has to happen early on.
Not recognizing that you're still a mechanic job shop and thinking that you're now running a Henry Ford Model T factory, which is companies like got 20 reps. We got product market fit. I'm like, oh, come on. Which is what we need is to be mechanics. We don't actually know what we're doing. At Salesforce, there was no blogs. All the blogs that were written for the people Salesforce 10 years later who don't admit that like we were selling a sales product to salespeople who like to be sold by salespeople replacing a shitty sales product. Turns out everyone on the call's job is harder than that, but that's okay. We had our struggles. But like we just were like, I don't know. I think we should do this. Okay, let's measure it. Did that work? Yes, let's do more of it. That didn't work. Well, that was stupid. Let's not do that. We have to be mechanics. We have to learn and do not think you've got it all figured out. What I'll say is
seems like a really important way to do that is like to manage by metric in order to see like
I was about to say poor sales management, right?
Yeah.
Given all the items above, it's kind of core. And this is the big challenge in early companies. And I always tell CEOs, like when they hire a head of sales or head of marketing, I said, let's figure out the priorities that's no more than 5. Because what will happen, especially like, oh, if I hire somebody from a large successful company, they're not going to work or get their hands dirty. It's the opposite. They're used to success. They're going to try to overwork. Like, what are the 3 to 5 things that we're going to focus on and ignore everything else? And so like really from a sales manager perspective, kind of going like, look, these are the top 2, 3 areas we got to get right. I know the rest of this is a shit show, but that's a secondary thing. As we start getting to 20 to 50, I'll be like, hey, who does training at this org? They're like, yeah, I guess the sales management.
Everyone does. It's everyone's responsibility.
And I'm like, oh, you still believe in weekly releases because you're the lean friggin' startup, so you're rolling shit out that no one understands what you've actually rolled out. And anyway, so like no enablement. And all of this basically leads to premature scaling. And look, the VCs for the last 4 to 5 years, I like to think I'm not one of these. And I don't think I did this as much. But in a world in which is grow, 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 and in a SaaS model, unless you're product led, the only way you can do triple, 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 double, double is if you hire like 15 more reps than you know what to do with right now and hope that it works. Because after ramp, by the time they ramp, you will have figured it out. That's what we did. Like we put founders and everybody on like this mental health. The analogy I use is you take a founder, a sales ops person, put them on a Peloton, tell them to run a 6-minute mile, put Crisco on it, and give her rubber ducky boots and say, how does that go? How does that feel? Well, it sucks. So those are the mistakes that they see. And we try to make sure that we tell people, take your time. We sell no wine before it's time. That's an old person Paul Masson reference. And build a balanced house.
Yeah. These are good. These are good ones. These are good end stage appropriate. One thing that so I would love to kind of hear from you as you've moved from like an operator to an investor. Like, I imagine it's tough because you're a very hands-on guy. You're an operator by background, but like an operator's operator, right? And so now you have to be a little bit more hands-off. But on the flip side, like being hands-on is important in an early stage environment. You don't want people to like make mistakes that are like eminently avoidable, right? So like, and I think you guys take a lot of pride at Bonfire, like being quote unquote blue collar. Maybe you can kind of talk a little bit about like what that transition has been like.
It's interesting because most of the VCs in my career told me that I wouldn't be a good VC because I'm such a top operator that I'd look at something, go 15 doors like that will never work. It's actually been the opposite. If there's an idea or a product or potential movement that's interesting, I'll actually overlook some operational issues because I will think, oh, I can help in that area. And I definitely
we can glow that up.
But I'm not the mini CEO of 15 companies, as my wife reminds me. So,
thank God.
Yes, thank God. Look, I don't know how, it's like been amazing that I'm in this second part of my career because what am I actually doing and how is it different than before? I'll tell you, it's very similar. All of my success in my software career was hiring lots of really smart young people or younger than me, kind of being tough with them and getting them out of their way. I think the respective net worth of individuals that had the opportunity to work with or who worked for me is like north of $10 billion. I should have invested in all of their startups when they left, but that's a topic for another day. So look, all I've done is software. And so two things that I think about with founders is how do you navigate like what makes a really important company 5 to 10 years out? And then how do you prioritize in the interim? What do you do in a decade versus 1 year? Two, when you're stuck in the day-to-day of running a company, I can pick up on things that are going well or not that you may not. And sometimes I have to remind
it's like it's tough kind of seeing the forest through the trees when you're like right down at it. And of course, like the 30,000 view is like, probably too distant, but somebody who's like 1,000 feet up, that's pretty helpful.
Look, I have wisdom in that, look, anything you're going to try to do, I've effed up 10 ways to Sunday. So I can be like, don't do that. So, but like at Bonfire, we're a little different.
This is how it's gonna play out.
Little Bonfire plug, like we like to go to work with our founders. We got our new funds, about 180 million. In 3 years, we'll do maybe only 25 core positions. That means I'll do 2 deals a year. I'll probably spend 100 hours in the first year with those founders and teams. And because the reality is C to A is really, really hard. The failure rate even 2 years ago was very high because to make that transition, there's 2 journeys you've got to do. Your business journey. How do I move from a team of 5 doing everything and some traction and customers to like a nicely formed small org that's nailing one motion, one buyer, one marketing motion, one sales success, etc. And the second one is the personal journey. It's very lonely as a founder. There are moments of self-doubt. You have crazy math dreams. We've joked about that before. The math class you're missing. And you will probably have 4 negative data points for every 1 good data point you have each week. So a lot of that is therapy. So, the mix of what we do is business advice and then a lot of quite frankly, therapy. And we're not perfect at it, but there was a cool thing. There was a group called Newcomer that did a survey. They asked 441 founders, and they verified who their investors were. Would you take money from this firm again? And little old Bonfire out of 419 firms came in third, just below Union Square. Bud Wilson's amazing, so being in that company, and and above YC. So we must be doing something. Must be doing something right.
Did they must have not like pulled your founders, right? Is that what that's what happened there? Elliot's here to take us away. Yeah, Brett is a phenomenal board member. We're super blessed to have him on the Atrium board here, as as Melanie from Spec It would say, and also the Andy and Jason from Toriel would also say as well. Elliot, are you here with the hook? You're going to take us away?
Yep, here we go.
All right.
Just want to wrap things up. I want to say a big thank you for everyone for attending. Always love having you guys here. Big thank you to Atrium for always being a wonderful sponsor, doing great things. Link to their website is in the chat, so make sure to check them out. Big thank you to Pete and Brett for providing this amazing content. Recordings and key takeaways will be available on our page shortly. Also, don't forget to check out our upcoming events. We'll see you next time. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, Elliot. Thanks, Brett.
Thanks.